I didn't believe in Dogman, or Bigfoot, or any of that. I was a 4 to 6-year-old father just trying to give his kids one normal Christmas after a divorce. I was wrong. Something followed us through the woods that night, and the only reason my children are alive is because it chose not to finish what it started. If you're listening to this and you've experienced something similar, you're not alone. And if you want to hear how this really unfolded, subscribe and leave a comment, because stories like this don't get told often, and they don't go away. I've gone back and forth for years about whether to talk about this. I'm not the kind of person who chases attention, and I'm definitely not someone who wants to be labeled as that guy with the monster story. I worked maintenance for the county parks department for almost 2 decades. Before that, I spent 6 years in the National Guard. I'm practical. I believe in receipts, not rumors. If something can be explained logically, I'm the first one to do it. At least I was. This happened 3 days before Christmas, December 22, 2019, in northern Wisconsin. Vilos County, just outside the town of Eagle River. If you know the area, you know it's nothing but pine forest, frozen lakes, and logging roads that all look the same once the snow sets in. I'd lived there most of my life. Those woods weren't exotic or mysterious to me. They were familiar. Comfortable, even. After the divorce, I got the kids for Christmas Eve and Christmas morning that year. It was my first holiday alone with them since everything fell apart, and I was determined not to let it feel broken. No arguing. No tension. Just something simple and memorable. My daughter Emma was 12, my son Luke was 9, and both of them had been asking to go cut down a real Christmas tree like we used to when they were younger. There's a patch of state forest about 15 miles west of town where tree cutting is allowed with a permit. I'd done it dozens of times before. Grab a saw, hike in a bit, pick a decent balsam fir, and haul it out. Nothing risky about it. I checked the weather that morning, 26 degrees, overcast, snow on the ground but no wind. Quiet winter day. We left just after noon in my old Ford F-150, the green one with the rusted wheel wells. I remember Emma complaining about how the heater smelled like dust, and Luke asking if we could stop for gas station hot chocolate on the way back. Normal kid stuff. The kind of noise that fills a truck cab and makes everything feel grounded and real. I parked at the end of an unplowed access road off County Highway G. The snow there was packed down from snowmobiles, and I wasn't worried about getting stuck. I grabbed the saw, a length of rope, and made sure the kids had their boots zipped and gloves on tight. Emma rolled her eyes like only a preteen can, but she smiled when I handed her the thermos. The woods were quiet in that way winter woods always are. Not silent, just muted. Snow absorbs sound. The sky was a dull gray, and the light felt flat, like everything was under a blanket. We walked maybe a quarter mile in, following an old deer trail I knew well. I'd worked storm cleanup out here years back. I knew where the low spots were, where the ground dipped toward a frozen creek. At first, everything felt fine. Normal. We joked about crooked trees and argued about whether a shorter one would fit better in the living room. Luke kept swinging a stick like a sword, smacking saplings until I told him to knock it off. I noticed the quiet before I noticed anything else. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden snap or roar. Just a gradual awareness that I hadn't heard anything in a while. No birds. No squirrels. Even our footsteps sounded too loud, like they didn't belong. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I remember telling myself I was being stupid. It was winter. Animals lay low. That was it. We found the tree about 10 minutes later. A decent balsam, maybe 7 feet tall, tucked between 2 larger pines. While I was sawing, Emma wandered a few steps away to take pictures on her phone. Luke stood close, asking a million questions like he always did. That's when I caught the smell. It was faint at first, but wrong. Not rot, not skunk. Wet fur, maybe. Like a dog that's been outside too long, mixed with something sour underneath. My blood ran cold for reasons I couldn't explain. I stopped sawing and sniffed again, slow and deliberate. "Dad," Luke said. "Why'd you stop?" "I thought I heard something," I said, which was a lie. I hadn't heard anything. That was the problem. I finished cutting the tree faster than I needed to, tied the rope around it, and slung it over my shoulder. I told the kids we were heading back. Emma looked up from her phone, annoyed. "We just got here," she said. "We've got what we need," I replied. "Let's go." As we started walking, I felt it. that sensation of being watched. Not imagined, not vague, specific. Focused. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I didn't. You don't run with kids in deep snow unless you have to. I kept my pace steady and my voice calm, asking them about school, about what cookies we should make that night. Behind us, somewhere deeper in the trees, snow crunched. Not light. Not small. Deliberate. I told myself it was a dare. Maybe a bear that hadn't denned yet. That explanation should have worked. It always had before. But the steps didn't match. They weren't bounding or wandering. They followed our pace. When Emma reached for my hand without saying anything, I knew she felt it too. That was the moment, right there, before I ever saw anything, when I realized this wasn't going to be a normal Christmas memory. And whatever was out there with us had already decided to let us know it was there. By the time we finished dinner, the snow had started falling heavier, the kind that makes everything quieter than it should be. Not peaceful quiet. Smothered quiet. The kids were restless, bouncing between the couch and the tree, begging to go outside with their new sleds before it got too late. I checked the time on my phone, 6:47 p.m., and told myself it was fine. We weren't far from the cabin. Just the clearing behind it and the old trail that looped toward the frozen creek. I led them up like I always did, boots, hats, gloves, scarves pulled up over their mouths. I remember fumbling with my youngest zipper, my fingers stiff from the cold, thinking how normal the moment felt. How badly I needed it to stay that way. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the same cheap lead one I used to check the shed back home, and we stepped outside into the snow. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No wind in the trees. No owls. No distant highway noise. Just the soft crunch of our boots and the kids laughing, their voices sounding too loud, like they didn't belong out there. My hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I remember actually shaking my head, annoyed at myself. You're tired. That's all. We walked maybe 100 yards into the trees when my daughter stopped and asked if she could hear music. I told her no, that it was probably just the wind in her hood. She frowned and kept walking, but I listened harder. There was something, low, uneven, like a hum that cut in and out. Not mechanical. Not natural either. It made my blood run cold, though I couldn't have explained why. A few steps later, the humming stopped. That's when the smell hit me. It came on sudden and thick, like wet dog mixed with something sour and rotten underneath. It made my stomach tighten, and I instinctively pulled my scarf higher. I told myself it was a dead deer, maybe one that hadn't been buried properly by the snow yet. Northern Wisconsin had plenty of those. Still, every instinct screamed at me to turn around. I didn't. That's the part one hates admitting. We reached the edge of the creek, the ice glowing faintly under the flashlight beam. I let the kids slide a few times, watching their breath puff white into the air. I tried to relax. Tried to enjoy it. Then my son asked why the woods were watching us. I laughed, too loud. Asked him what he meant. He pointed into the trees, just beyond where the light faded. It feels like eyes, he said. Like when someone stares at you at school. Time seemed to slow down. I swung the flashlight toward where he pointed. The beam cut through branches, snowflakes sparkling like static. Nothing there. Just trees. I told him he was imagining it, that the dark can play tricks on you. Even as I said it, my hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the flashlight with both hands. That's when we heard the first sound. It wasn't a growl. Not exactly. It was deeper. A long, throaty exhale that ended in a clicking noise, like teeth touching. It came from behind us. I spun around, heart slamming in my chest, the beam bouncing wildly. Hey! I shouted, my voice cracking. Anyone there? No answer. The kids had gone quiet, pressed close to my legs. I told myself it was a bear, even though bears were supposed to be hibernating. Maybe a wolf. That made more sense. Wolves didn't usually come that close to people, but winter changed things. Hunger changed things. Another sound came, closer this time. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Each step deliberate, like whatever it was wanted us to hear it moving. Every rational explanation started to fall apart. I grabbed my daughter's hand and told them we were heading back. Right now. No arguing. They didn't argue. They could feel it too. The sense of being watched intensified, pressing in on us from all sides. It felt wrong, unnatural, like the woods themselves were leaning in. As we moved, the footsteps matched us. Not behind anymore. To the side. Parallel. I angled the flashlight that way and caught movement, just a shape slipping between trees, taller than any man I'd ever seen. My breath caught in my throat. The beam shook, and I lost it again. "That's not a wolf," I whispered before I could stop myself. The smell got stronger, making my eyes water. The kids were crying now, trying to be quiet like I asked, their breaths coming fast and panicked. Another sound rolled through the trees, a low chuffing noise that vibrated in my chest. My blood ran cold. I tried to speed up, but the snow was deep, my boots slipping. The footsteps adjusted, never rushing, never falling behind. It felt like it was hurting us. We broke into the clearing near the cabin, and for one brief second, I felt relief. Then the porch light flickered and went out. I fumbled with my keys, dropping them once, my fingers numb and clumsy. Behind us, something stepped out of the tree line. I didn't turn to look. I shoved the kids inside, slammed the door, and threw my weight against it as something hit the outside wall. The impact rattled the windows, a deep thud followed by the scrape of claws against wood. The kids were screaming now, and I was too, shouting for them to get to the bedroom and lock the door. Whatever was outside moved around the cabin, slow and methodical. I could hear it breathing through the walls, smell it even through the cracks. It tested the windows, one by one, like it understood what they were. I stood there with my back to the door, shaking so hard my teeth chattered, realizing with sick certainty that this thing wasn't just an animal. It was thinking. And it wasn't done with us yet. By the time we reached the trailhead sign, I knew we weren't alone. I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't. Saying it would have made it real, and once it was real, I didn't know how I was supposed to protect two kids who still believed reindeer could fly. I kept my voice steady, told them to stay close, told myself it was just nerves, just a forest doing what forests do at night. But the woods were wrong. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It felt emptied. Like everything living had stepped back and left a space just for us. No wind through the branches. No distant traffic hum from Highway 13. Even the snow under our boots sounded muffled, as if the ground itself was holding its breath. That's when I smelled it. It came in waves, carried low to the ground. Not rot exactly, not like a dead animal. More like wet dog mixed with old iron and something sharp, almost sour. It hit the back of my throat and made my stomach turn. I slowed without meaning to, my hand drifting back until my fingers brushed Emma's sleeve. "Dad?" she whispered. "What's that smell?" "Probably a skunk," I said, too fast. "They spray sometimes in winter." I didn't believe that for a second. Skunk spray is sharp, chemical. This was heavy. Warm. Alive. We'd just passed the trailhead kiosk when there was a sound off to our left. Not close, but not far either. A crunch of snow, slow and deliberate, like something placing its weight carefully. I stopped walking. The kids bumped into me. "What?" Jacob asked. I held up a finger, listening. Another step. Then another. Each one matched my breathing. When I stopped breathing, it stopped moving. My blood ran cold. I told myself it was a deer. Deer moved like that sometimes, cautious around people. Except deer didn't pace you. They bolted. They didn't follow at a distance that felt intentional. We started walking again, faster this time. The steps followed. Always to the left. Always just out of sight. I could feel eyes on us, feel that pressure between my shoulder blades like someone standing too close in a checkout line. I pulled my phone out, thumb shaking, and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut a narrow tunnel through the trees, lighting up snow-laden branches and pale trunks. Nothing moved. Nothing reflected. But the smell got stronger. Emma started crying then. Quietly at first, trying to be brave. That nearly broke me. I scooped her up without stopping, her arms locking tight around my neck. Jacob stumbled trying to keep up, his breathing turning ragged. "I want to go home," he said. "Dad, I don't like this." "I know," I said. "We're almost there." That was a lie. The parking lot was still at least half a mile away, downhill, through a section of dense pines where the trail narrowed and curved. No sightlines. No open space. Just trees packed tight like a wall. The sound changed when we hit that section. It wasn't footsteps anymore. It was movement. Branches bending. Snow sliding off limbs. Something paralleling us through terrain that should have slowed it down, but didn't. Whatever it was moved like it knew the forest better than I ever could. I broke into a jog. The kids struggled to keep up, boots slipping. My lungs burned, cold air shredding my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave them, couldn't drop Emma, couldn't risk Jacob falling behind. That's when it circled. The sound shifted suddenly from our left to behind us, then ahead, cutting across through the trees. Fast. Too fast. There was a heavy thump, like something landing hard, followed by silence. Complete silence. I stopped dead. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the phone steady. I swept the flashlight beam ahead, then side to side. The beam caught something high on a tree trunk, deep gouges in the bark, fresh, the pale wood beneath exposed like a wound. They were too high to be from a bear. Way too high. Emma buried her face in my shoulder. Jacob whispered, "Dad, what is that?" I didn't answer because I didn't have one. A sound rolled through the trees then. Low. Vibrating. Not a growl exactly, not an animal noise I recognized. It had a rhythm to it, like breathing force through a chest too big for its lungs. I felt it more than heard it, a pressure in my ears, in my ribs. It felt wrong. Unnatural. I turned slowly in a full circle, flashlight shaking, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Every shadow looked like a shape waiting to step forward. Every tree trunk felt like it might move if I looked away. Then something moved at the edge of the light. Just a glimpse. A darker shape against darker trees. Tall. Too tall. It shifted behind a pine, deliberate, controlled. Not spooked. Not startled. Watching. Time seemed to slow down. I realized then that this thing wasn't chasing us. It was herding us. Steering us along the trail, cutting off angles, testing how fast we moved, how we reacted. Like a predator studying unfamiliar prey. I backed up, step by step, never taking my eyes off where I'd seen the movement. My heel hit something solid. Wood. The trail signpost. We were back at the junction somehow, even though we'd been moving downhill the whole time. That shouldn't have been possible. My phone screen flickered, the flashlight dimming. I smacked it against my palm, panic rising. The battery indicator dropped from 40% to red in the span of seconds. No, 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 I muttered. The sound came again, closer now. To my right. I heard breath. Wet. Heavy. And something else, teeth clicking together, slow and patient. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But there was nowhere left to go. And whatever was out there knew it. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was frozen there with that thing standing at the edge of the clearing, and the next my legs were carrying me backward toward the cabin without my brain ever catching up. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something deeper, older, told me that turning my back completely would be the worst mistake I could make. The Dogman stepped forward. That's the only word that fits. It didn't lunge or charge. It stepped, deliberately, one long leg sliding out of the shadows into the faint yellow glow spilling from the cabin window. When it straightened, it was taller than I expected. 8 feet at least. Maybe more. Hard to judge in the dark, but its head nearly lined up with the lower branches of the pine behind it. My blood ran cold. It was built wrong for anything I knew. The torso was thick and muscular like a powerlifter's, but stretched vertically, the shoulders too broad, the waist too narrow. Its arms hung low, almost to its knees, ending in hands that weren't paws, not fully. Long fingers, each tipped with a curved black claw that caught the light when it moved. The fur was dark, a mix of charcoal and muddy brown, matted in places like it had been sleeping in wet ground. Around the chest and neck, it was thicker, almost like a menhir. The head was pure nightmare. Canine, unmistakably, but larger than any wolf I'd ever seen. The snout was long and heavy, the jaw thick with muscle. When it opened its mouth slightly, I saw teeth laid behind teeth, yellowed and chipped, built for crushing. Its ears were upright, twitching independently, tracking sounds I couldn't hear. Then it looked at me. Not just in my direction, at me. Direct eye contact. The eyes were a pale amber, reflective but not glowing the way movies show. There was something behind them. Focus. Calculation. It felt wrong, unnatural, like being looked at by something that knew exactly what I was and was deciding what to do about it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep my balance. My mouth went dry, a metallic taste spreading across my tongue. I realized I'd been holding my breath and forced myself to inhale, slow and shallow. Behind me, the cabin door creaked. I didn't turn, but I heard my daughter whisper my name. That broke something in me. Fear turned into pure, white-hot urgency. Inside, I hissed without looking back. Now. Lock the door. The dogman's head snapped toward the sound. It took one step closer to the cabin, and the ground vibrated under my boots. Not hard, just enough that I felt it through the soles. A warning. Or a test. I moved sideways, putting myself fully between it and the cabin. My flashlight was still in my hand. I didn't remember turning it on, but suddenly the beam was cutting across its chest and face. That was a mistake. It flinched, not away, but back, then let out a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a howl. It was something in between, low and vibrating, like metal being dragged across concrete, layered with a wet, animal rasp. The sound went straight through me. My knees buckled, and I had to brace myself to keep from falling. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I stood there, shaking, the beam of light dancing across its body. It circled to its left, slow and deliberate, never breaking eye contact. When I adjusted, it adjusted. When I stepped back, it matched me. It was hurting me without rushing, controlling the space like it had done this before. I realized then that it could have reached me already if it wanted to. That thought was worse than anything else. The smell hit me as it moved closer. Wet dog, yes, but underneath that, something rotten. Like meat left too long in a freezer after the power goes out. It made my stomach turn. It leaned forward, sniffing the air, head tilting slightly. I could see its chest rising and falling. Slow. Calm. Not excited. Curious. Studying me. Time seemed to slow down. Every detail burned itself into my memory, the way its claws dug slightly into the frozen ground, the faint steam coming from its mouth, the scar running diagonally across its left shoulder like something had tried, and failed, to hurt it before. Behind me, the cabin door slammed shut. The dogman's head snapped toward the sound again. This time, its lips pulled back. I couldn't move, frozen in place. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. For a split second, I was sure it was going to charge. I braced for it, tensing every muscle. It didn't. Instead, it did something that still confuses me. It stepped backward. Just one step. Then another. It never broke eye contact. Its ears flattened briefly, not in fear, but in something like irritation. Then it turned its head slightly and let out a short, sharp bark into the woods behind it. Something answered. Not close. Farther out in the darkness. Another sound, lower, shorter. My legs almost gave out. There wasn't just one. The dogman looked back at me one last time. There was no anger in its eyes. No hunger. Just a cold, assessing awareness, like I was a problem it had decided wasn't worth solving tonight. Then it turned. Not ran. Walked. Melted back into the trees, its shape breaking apart as the shadows swallowed it. Within seconds, it was gone. The woods went silent again. Too silent. I stood there long after it disappeared, flashlight beam shaking, waiting for it to come back. Waiting for the charge that never came. Every second felt borrowed. Finally, my son shouted my name from inside, panic cracking his voice. That snapped me out of it. I ran for the cabin, slammed the door behind me, and locked every lock we had. I shoved the table against the door, pulled the curtains tight, and killed the lights. The kids were crying now, quiet, terrified sobs. I held them both, my back against the door, listening. Outside, something moved through the trees. Branches snapped. Snow crunched. Slow. Deliberate. Then, just once, right outside the wall behind us, I heard breathing. Not human. Close enough that the thin wood of the cabin felt like paper. I covered my kids' mouths and held my breath. Minutes passed. Or hours. I don't know. Eventually, the breathing stopped. The sounds faded. The woods stayed silent. We didn't sleep at all that night. At dawn, when I finally worked up the courage to step outside, the snow around the cabin was torn up with tracks, massive, elongated prints with claw marks at the front. Bigger than my size 12 boots by a long shot. Whatever followed us through those woods had been real. And it had let us live. I didn't sleep at all after that night, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the woods, hearing that breathing just beyond the beam of my flashlight. The kids slept in my room, bundled together on the floor in a mess of blankets and coats we never bothered to take off. I lay awake on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned, slow and uneven, counting the seconds between its faint clicks. By morning, the storm had blown through. Sunlight came in pale and weak through the frost-covered windows. It looked peaceful outside, like nothing had happened at all. That almost bothered me more than the fear. If there had been claw marks on the walls or shattered glass, I could have pointed to something and said, "See, this was real." Instead, it felt like the world had reset itself overnight, like it was daring me to question my own memory. The kids didn't talk much at breakfast. They picked at cold Pop-Tarts and avoided looking at the windows. When my daughter finally asked if we could go home early, I didn't argue. I told them we'd pack up after we ate. I didn't tell them why I was already stuffing things into bags with shaking hands. Before we left, I forced myself to go back outside. I don't know why. Part of me wanted proof. Another part wanted to make sure whatever had followed us was gone. The air was bitter and clean, that sharp Wisconsin cold that burns your lungs. Snow crunched under my boots as I walked toward the tree line where we'd crossed the night before. That's when I saw the tracks. They weren't deer. They weren't bear. They were wrong. Each print was longer than my size 11 boot, sunk deep into the snow like something heavy had been standing there for a while. You could see the shape clearly, a long pad, distinct toes, and claw marks that dug forward like it had been gripping the ground. And the stride was the worst part. The distance between each print was enormous, like whatever made them had been walking upright and taking slow, deliberate steps. My blood ran cold. I stood there staring, the hair on the back of my neck standing straight up, and suddenly I felt that same pressure again. That sense of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line, half expecting to see it standing there in the daylight. Nothing moved. But the silence was back. No birds. No wind. Just that dead, heavy quiet. I didn't take pictures. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid my phone wouldn't work again. Maybe I didn't want proof that would make it impossible to pretend this hadn't happened. I just backed away slowly, never turning my back on the woods, until I reached the cabin. We left within the hour. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every time we passed a stretch of forest, my eyes flicked to the trees. The kids stayed quiet in the back seat, bundled up, watching their reflections in the windows. None of us turned on the radio. It felt wrong to fill the car with noise. When we got back into town, the world felt too normal. Cars at stoplights. People carrying shopping bags. Christmas decorations blinking cheerfully on lampposts. I wanted to pull over and scream at someone, ask them if they knew what lived just a few miles into the woods. I didn't tell anyone at first. I told my ex-wife that the trip got cut short because of the storm. She didn't question it. I told my boss I needed a couple extra days off. I didn't explain why I couldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, adrenaline finally wearing off. That lie lasted about a week. Then my son started having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming, saying something was standing outside his window, breathing. My daughter stopped wanting to sleep with the lights off. She wouldn't go into the backyard alone anymore, even during the day. And me? I couldn't walk past a tree line without feeling my chest tighten. That's when I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I went back to the area a month later, during the day, with a friend from work who hunts. I didn't tell him what I really saw. I just said something big had been around the cabin. He laughed it off at first, until he saw the marks on a tree near the trail. Deep gouges, higher than his head. He stopped smiling after that. He didn't say Dogman. He didn't say bear either. He just said, whatever did that. I wouldn't hunt here. And that was enough. I still drive through Wisconsin forests. I still live my life. But I don't camp anymore. I don't take my kids into deep woods. And every Christmas, when the snow gets heavy and the nights get long, I think about that thing standing between the trees, watching us. I think about how it could have caught us. How it chose not to. And I know, without a doubt, that there are things out there that don't need legends or stories to exist. They are patient. They are smart. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they let you walk away. If you hear heavy breathing where there shouldn't be any, don't investigate. Get out. Because next time, it might not stop. I don't remember deciding to move. I just remember realizing that if I stayed where I was, we were all going to die. The thing outside had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the safe kind of quiet. It was the kind where you know something is repositioning, planning, waiting for you to make a mistake. My blood ran cold when I understood that it wasn't pacing anymore. It had stopped wasting energy. That's when I felt it. A vibration. Not sound, pressure. Like a heavy truck idling nearby, except it was coming through the ground, up through my boots, into my knees. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep a grip on the flashlight, and when I clicked it on again, the beam caught something that made my stomach drop. The snow behind the cabin door was disturbed. Not scattered. Pressed. Something had stood there. Leaned close. I could see where the snow had been compacted into long, oval depressions, far wider than any boot, far longer than a bear's paw. Whatever it was, it had put its weight there deliberately, listening to us breathe on the other side of the door. I tasted bile. "Dad?" my daughter whispered, so quietly it was barely air. I turned and put a finger to my lips. I didn't trust my voice. My heart was pounding so loud I was convinced it could hear it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go except through it. Then the handle moved. Just a fraction. A slow test. The latch held, but the wood around it creaked under pressure. Not jerking. Not panicked. Curious. Intelligent. I'd worked construction long enough to know the difference between brute force and controlled strength. This was the latter. It felt wrong. Unnatural. I realized then that it wasn't trying to break in yet. It was learning. Learning how much force it would need. Learning how fast we reacted. Learning me. Time seemed to slow down. I thought about the drive-in. About how I'd parked the SUV nose out of habit, because my dad drilled that into me when I was a teenager. Always leave yourself an exit. I'd never been so grateful for something so small. The car was maybe 40 yards away. Across open snow. No cover. A death sentence, unless the thing let us go. I made a choice I still don't know how to live with. I stood up. The floorboard creaked, loud as a gunshot in the silence. My kids stiffened. I felt the pressure outside shift immediately, like a predator's attention snapping to motion. The handle stopped moving. I stepped closer to the door and spoke, my voice barely more than breath. "Please." I don't know who I was talking to. God. The thing. The dark. "Please," I whispered again. "They're just kids." There was a pause so long my lungs burned. Then something scratched the door. Slow. Deliberate. Not deep enough to break through. Just enough to let me hear the sound of claw on wood. Testing. Sending a message. My hands were shaking so bad I had to brace myself against the wall to stay upright. Then it did something worse. It stepped back. Far enough that I could see it through the narrow window beside the door when it shifted again. The beam from my flashlight caught movement, massive shoulders, fur dark against darker trees. It straightened slightly, and that's when I understood just how tall it really was. The window was almost 7 feet off the ground. Its eyes were above it. They reflected amber, but not like an animal. There was depth there. Awareness. I couldn't move. Frozen in place. I felt exposed in a way I've never felt before or since, like every thought in my head was being catalogued. It tilted its head. Studying me. Then, God help me, it smiled. Not a human smile. Not lips curling. Just a baring of teeth, slow and intentional, like it wanted me to understand exactly what it could do if it chose to. My blood ran cold. That was when my son sobbed. Just a sound. A broken inhale. The thing's head snapped toward the noise instantly. No hesitation. No confusion. Its body shifted, muscles rolling under fur, and for the first time all night, I saw impatience ripple through it. Decision. I didn't think. I reacted. I threw the flashlight as hard as I could through the open side window, shattering the glass. It exploded into the snow 30 feet away, beam still on, spinning wildly. Light. Motion. Something new. The Dogman, because by then I had no other word for it, turned toward it. Just for a second. That second saved our lives. "Run," I hissed. I grabbed both kids, shoved the door open, and we bolted into the cold. The air burned my lungs instantly. Snow crunched under our feet, loud and unforgiving. I expected impact at any second, claws in my back, weight crushing me into the ground. It didn't happen. Behind us, something roared. Not anger. Frustration. We reached the SUV. I yanked the door open, threw my daughter inside, then my son, and dove in after them. My hands were shaking so bad I fumbled the keys twice before they slid into the ignition. The engine turned over. Once. Twice. I screamed at it. It started. Headlights flooded the clearing, and for one horrifying second, I saw it standing at the tree line. Full height. Massive. Watching us with those same calm, calculating eyes. It didn't chase. It just stood there. As if to let me know this wasn't an escape. It was mercy. I slammed the car into gear and tore down the trail, branches slamming against the sides, tears blinding me. I didn't slow down until the pavement hit under the tires and the world felt real again. Even then, I didn't stop shaking. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. It had let us go. And that knowledge terrified me more than the chase ever could. I didn't stop driving until the gas light came on and my hands were so cramped around the steering wheel that I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. The road out of the forest blurred into a tunnel of frost and headlights, and every shadow on the shoulder looked like it was moving toward us. My kids were silent in the back seat, bundled under coats and blankets, breathing in shallow, exhausted bursts. That scared me more than if they'd been crying. When I finally pulled into a 24-hour gas station outside Rhinelander, I shut the engine off and just sat there. My legs wouldn't work right away. My blood still felt thick, slow, like it hadn't caught up with what had happened. I checked the mirrors 3 times before opening my door. Inside the station, the heat hit me so hard it made me dizzy. The clerk asked if we were okay. I told him we hit a deer. That was the first lie. It came out automatically, smooth and practiced, like I'd been rehearsing it the whole drive. He nodded, unconcerned, and went back to his phone. In the bathroom, under fluorescent lights, I finally saw the damage clearly. Deep gouges raked across the rear quarter panel of my SUV, not crushed metal like a collision, but peeled back like someone had dug in and pulled. The scratches were too high for any animal I'd ever known. Higher than my shoulder. There were clumps of dark, coarse hair snagged in the torn paint, stiff and oily to the touch. I wrapped them in a paper towel without really thinking why. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back. My face was gray, eyes bloodshot, jaw trembling. There were faint red marks along my forearm where I must have scraped against the door frame when I dragged my daughter inside. I didn't remember doing that. My body had just moved. We drove the rest of the way to my sister's house in silence. She met us at the door in her robe, confused and half asleep, and I broke down the moment she asked what happened. I told her something had chased us. I didn't say what. She didn't press. She just hugged the kids and made hot chocolate and let me sit on the floor with my back against the wall until the shaking stopped. The next morning, after everyone slept, I drove back alone. I don't know why. Part of me wanted proof. Part of me wanted to convince myself it was all stress and exhaustion and grief mixing into something ugly. I told myself I'd just check the trailhead, see if there were tracks, then leave. The parking area was empty. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, a clean white blanket smoothing everything over. For a moment, hope flared in my chest. See? Nothing. You imagined it. Then I walked toward the tree line. The prints were there. Huge impressions sunk deep into the snow, each one longer than my forearm, with toe marks that ended in claws. They weren't random. They followed the path we'd taken, paced alongside it, crossed it, circled back. At one point they stopped right where the trail narrowed, and faced the direction we'd run. I couldn't breathe. My blood ran cold. There were other signs too. Bark stripped from a cedar trunk nearly 8 feet up. A deer carcass 50 yards off the trail, opened in a way that made my stomach churn, ribs cracked outward, organs gone, the rest untouched. No drag marks. No scavenger mess. I took pictures with my phone. Later, when I looked at them, most were blurred or overexposed. The tracks looked small on screen. The scale was gone. Anyone could have shrugged them off as bare prints. Anyone who hadn't stood there, measuring them with shaking hands. I went to the sheriff's office that afternoon. I told them about being followed, about the scratches on my vehicle. I didn't say Dogman. I didn't say monster. I said something big and not acting like an animal. They listened politely. Took notes. One deputy glanced at the photos and said it was probably a bear displaced by early snowfall. Another asked if I'd been drinking. That was the second lie, this time from them. My insurance adjuster later classified the damage as wildlife-related vandalism. No explanation beyond that. No follow-up. Christmas came and went quietly that year. No tree. No lights. The kids didn't ask to go back into the woods. They didn't talk about that night at all, except once, weeks later, when my son asked if the tall wolf was still out there. I told him no. That was another lie. I sold the cabin in February, took a loss, didn't care. We moved closer to town. I stopped hiking. Stopped camping. Even parks made my skin crawl. Every time the wind shifted just right and carried the smell of wet earth and pine, my heart kicked into my throat. People noticed the change. Friends said the divorce had hit me harder than I admitted. They weren't wrong. They just weren't right either. I still have the hair sample, sealed in a plastic bag in a box I don't open. It smells faintly even now, like damp fur and iron. I've thought about sending it somewhere for testing, but I already know what the answer would be. Inconclusive. Contaminated. Unknown animal. I don't need a lab to tell me what I saw. It was real. It was intelligent. And it made a choice that night. Sometimes, late, when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, I replay the moment it stood between the trees, watching us. The way it didn't rush. The way it waited. Studied. Like we were a puzzle it had already solved. I don't think it spared us out of mercy. I think it was curious. Or cautious. Or maybe it just didn't need to kill us to prove something to itself. Whatever lives in those Wisconsin woods knows we're there. Knows our patterns. Knows our fear. And if you ever feel that sudden silence while walking under snow-heavy pines, when the birds vanish and the air smells wrong and every instinct screams at you to turn back, do it. Don't investigate. Don't rationalize. Don't stay to see. Because I promise you this. If it decides to finish what it started, no story gets told afterward. I took the Christmas Eve shift because nobody else wanted it. That's the kind of job it was. Private security for a closed industrial park outside Merrill, Wisconsin, tucked up against county forest land most people only noticed when they were lost or hunting. I was 42, divorced twice, no kids, and I'd worked security long enough to know silence was usually a good sign. Christmas night was supposed to be dead quiet. No deliveries. No employees. Just me, a thermos of bad coffee, and 8 hours of driving loops through empty lots. I didn't believe in Dogman either. Not then. I believed in trespassers, meth heads, and the occasional bear that wandered too close to dumpsters. That was my entire mental catalog of threats. The temperature that night sat around 9 degrees, cold enough that the snow squeaked under your boots. A half moon hung low and yellow, giving everything that dull glow that flattens shadows but makes them longer. Pines ringed the property on 3 sides, thick and dark, their branches sagging under old snow. The place always felt cut off from the world, but that night it felt sealed, like the cold had put a lid on everything. I started my rounds just after 11:30 p.m. I remember checking my dash clock because a radio station was playing some stripped-down acoustic version of Silent Night, and it annoyed me enough to switch it off. The silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. About 20 minutes into the patrol, I noticed the first thing that didn't sit right. No animal tracks. Not fresh ones, anyway. Usually you'd see rabbit trails, deer prints, something crossing the access roads. That night, the snow looked untouched, like the whole area had been vacuum sealed. I told myself it meant the cold had driven everything into cover. Then the smell hit me. I had the truck idling near Warehouse C, heater blasting, when something sharp and sour cut through the cab. It wasn't garbage or fuel. It was musky, wet, and rotten, like an unwashed animal that had been living in decay. My stomach tightened before my brain caught up. My blood ran cold, and I remember thinking, that's not normal. I stepped out with my flashlight, boots crunching loud in the quiet. The beam cut across the loading dock, catching frost on metal and the reflective tape on bollards. Nothing moved. No sound. But that smell was stronger outside, thick enough to make my eyes water. That's when I heard breathing. Not wind. Not the truck. Actual breathing, slow, deep, and steady, coming from somewhere beyond the dock, out near the tree line. Hair stood up on the back of my neck. I'd dealt with people hiding before, and this didn't sound like that. It sounded too big. I called out, voice louder than I felt. Security. If you're out there, you need to leave the property. The breathing stopped. The silence afterward was worse. It felt wrong, unnatural, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in the truck, but training, and pride, kept me rooted there for a few seconds too long. Something moved between the trees. I only caught a glimpse at first. A shape sliding from one trunk to the next, too tall to be a deer, too upright to be a bear. My flashlight shook as I tried to lock onto it. When the beam finally hit, it landed on a shoulder, broad, sloped, covered in dark, matted fur that glistened with frost. Time seemed to slow down. The thing stepped forward just enough for me to see its outline. It was standing on two legs, at least 8 feet tall if it was an inch, with arms that hung too long, ending in hands that were not paws. Fingers. Long, jointed fingers that flexed slowly, deliberately. Its head was canine, no doubt about that, but wrong in ways I still struggle to describe. The snout was long, the jaw heavy, but the eyes, those eyes were set forward like a man's. They reflected my flashlight in a dull amber glow, not bright like a deer's, but deep and focused. Intelligent. It was watching me. I couldn't move. Frozen in place. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep the flashlight steady. The smell rolled off it in waves, making me gag. Wet dog, iron, and something like old leaves rotting in a bag. It took a step closer. The snow compressed under its foot with a sound I felt in my chest more than heard. That's when I realized it wasn't charging. It wasn't aggressive. It was testing the distance, measuring me. I stumbled backward and nearly fell, catching myself on the truck door. I fumbled for the handle, eyes never leaving it. The creature tilted its head, just slightly, like it was curious about the movement. Like it was studying me. I got the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and locking it without thinking. The engine roared as I hit the gas, tires spinning before catching. In the side mirror, I saw it move, not running, not lunging, just stepping aside as the truck lurched forward. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. As I sped toward the main gate, the radio crackled to life on its own. Just static at first, then a low warbling sound, almost like feedback trying to become something else. My skin crawled. I shut it off, heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The gate came into view, and relief hit me hard enough to make my vision blur. That's when the truck rocked violently from the side. Metal screamed as claws raked along the rear quarter panel. The whole vehicle shuddered. I screamed. I don't remember what I said. Probably nothing coherent. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I blew through the gate arm, snapping it clean off, and didn't let up until I was 5 miles down the highway with my hazard lights flashing and my chest burning like I'd been running. I pulled over at a gas station, shaking so bad I couldn't get out of the truck for a full 10 minutes. When I finally did, I saw the damage. Deep gouges in the metal, 4 of them, running parallel like someone had dragged garden tools across the paint. They were high up, higher than any person could reach without a ladder. The deputy who responded listened, nodded, and didn't believe a word of it. He said bear. He always said bear. But bears don't stand on 2 legs and watch you think. Bears don't breathe slow and steady like they are calm. I quit that job a week later. I don't work nights anymore. I don't work near forests. And every Christmas, when the snow gets quiet and the woods look too still, I remember those eyes in the beam of my flashlight. If you're out there late at night and the forest goes silent all at once, don't investigate. Get out. Some things don't need to finish what they start to change you forever.